You're tuned in to RX Radio.
Welcome back to RX Radio. This week, you're joined by myself and my co-host, absentee Jordan Shallow. And somehow we get on the topic of why am I even here? Seriously, me personally, why am I here? Shallow seems to have a couple good ideas as to why myself or himself are here. I have none. The following podcast may give you hope. It may inspire you. It may make you want to crash your car at the side of the road. No guarantees. But this is where we are, deciding on why we are even here. If there's any purpose to my life, it's probably to bring you guys skill acquisition, an 8-week deep dive into advanced programming and organizational behavior. I'm remiss to say that if my co-host was here, Shallow, he would be able to dig even deeper into his feelings around the quality and value that organizational behavior brings to programming. This is something I've worked on now for 18 months. I'm more than excited to bring it to you guys again. We dig into not only the sports psychology behind managing athletes, how to manage and manipulate stress, how to choose exercise selection based on preparedness, time to competition. Skill acquisition could be many things. It could be nothing at all. But I think it's best described as a course in advanced programming. I'm not going to tell you to choose different exercises than you already do. I'm not going to try and change your mind. But what I am going to do is allow you to take what you already know and organize it in a way that is the most efficient and effective to get your clients and athletes the goals that they're looking for. Now enjoy this episode, because I know I didn't.
I was talking about this yesterday, but it's this idea of like, why am I even here? But like, not just like here, like in this podcast studio, but like anywhere.
Okay, did this thought correlate with you acquiring that Supreme jacket?
I think it was when I put it on.
You put it on. Did you have like an invisibility cloak of like?
Yeah, and I looked in the mirror and I went, "Why am I here?
Why am I here?" That's the $500 question.
Yeah,
whatever that sweater costs.
Probably $50.
Yeah, that's deep.
But it's like none of us asked to be here.
Okay, where are you going, Kevorkian?
No, I'm just saying, like, we just happen to exist.
Right. Yeah, it's unlikely. It's
not
the
like
least likely thing to have happened.
So I always think of it like a job, right? Like, I think that's the one real commitment everybody has, is like gainful employment.
Okay.
But at any given time, you can quit.
And now, just to make sure we're crystal clear,
Yeah.
Quitting is swan diving off the Empire State Building.
So this is the conversation I had yesterday. Like,
With
obviously,
who?
It doesn't matter.
Okay, because I want to know where I got to send a Christmas card to, like the poor soul that's got to.
But this is the funny part: is this idea that like quitting is, very unfortunately having to kill yourself.
Right, having to is a really interesting choice of words.
Well, if you don't want to be here anymore and you want
Supreme metal jacket.
Yeah. But it's like, man, like when you have a job and you decide like, I don't really like this job anymore, it's within your power to be like, I'm gonna go.
Deuces.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's like, I wish there was, but some people quit. Other people, they resign.
Okay.
Like they're not quitting with any kind
So
of
is it just
malice
leaving a letter?
or emotion or weight. They're
Okay.
just like, I'm going to resign from this position. I've done what I'm here to do.
Okay.
And I'm going to head on.
Okay.
I wish there was a way to resign from life, you know?
I don't think you do wish that.
I think sometimes I do.
I think it's a coma. I think that's a resignation.
See, that's what I mean. I think like a good coma, a good solid coma.
Good coma, right. This is the Seinfeld bit.
Yeah.
Well, I think your framing is off because I don't think you should look at it as a job. Because I think that immediately creates a false equivalency to the two things that allows the quitting resignation analogy to hold weight. But if you don't equate the two, then the rest of the analogy falls flat. I don't know what it is, but it's definitely not a job.
See, I think of it as a job.
Okay, well maybe you should look at it as indentured servitude because you can't quit.
But see, that makes it more depressing.
But why is it depressing?
Well, it's not really for me. It's just kind of like I'm done here.
Done doing what?
I don't know. Just being like,
You'd have to do something to be done.
Yeah, I guess.
I don't get it. Like most people would probably kill to be in your position.
Probably.
But you're sitting
I'd kill
here,
to get out of it.
I just don't understand the framework of that because you've been in way shittier situations.
I know.
So your ascension is like.
But I don't think it's that my situation is bad. I just think I'm just kind of like.
You're bored.
Yeah.
But why are you bored?
Because I don't really know why I'm here.
But so you weren't bored when you were like swinging hammer.
Oh no, I was bored then too.
Okay.
This isn't like a this time emotion.
There's a weird. I don't know if you're at the tax bracket yet where these conversations make a lot of sense.
I don't. Well, I've always. This is like an existential crisis.
Lundy's losing it. You know what I mean? It's like I felt the same way. That like we've talked about the unit price of eggs.
Yeah.
It's like once I stopped having to look at that, it was like, oh, okay. I get where you're coming from,
Like,
but I
life
also
is
don't get
definitely-
where I'm coming from.
Life is definitely great,
Okay.
and that's what I want to make clear.
Okay.
I have an amazing life,
Right?
but like this isn't an emotion like attached to a state of being.
Yeah.
It's a feeling about the state of being.
So when did this? Because I understand what you're saying 100%. I live it. I get it. But I also think for me, it's more chronological. Like I haven't felt that way for a super long time.
I see.
You're saying you have?
Always.
Always. Like, give me always. Like you weren't a nihilistic third grader.
No, I think I was. I can't remember that far
Sure,
back,
yeah,
but I
fair.
could like remember like high school, middle school, and just you know what it is. It's like the feeling of being like not the right man for the job.
But were you angsty? I feel like I kind of got a little bit of that when my hair was longer and I was in high school. But like I feel like it was just kind of angst.
I guess. Am I still angsty though?
And well, here's the thing: it's you're not rich enough to be like that
that's
nihilistic,
true.
and you're not.
Poor enough to be angsty.
Well, you're not young enough to be angsty.
Yeah.
I think angsty is more like a chronological thing.
And I think the thing is, I don't have an enemy. Like angst
Yeah, you
comes with an.
living rent free between your ears, my
Yeah,
friend. That's
it's me. I'm
that's
the
ghost
enemy.
of the machine.
But yeah, it's just a weird feeling. Sometimes you're just like, it's not even imposter syndrome, but it's like I look up from a desk that is life, and I go, well, I'm not the right guy for the job, and I try and matrix it to the stairwell.
But there's no criteria. There's no job description.
And I think herein lies the issue.
You do really well in a communist state.
Probably. I
think
think that's
so.
why I did well in a trade.
Yeah, to each
There's like
according
a
to his
clear
ability, to each
direction.
according to his means, or
They're like,
whatever.
here's a
that
hammer,
marks.
and I was like, this can be distracting, but that's what it is.
So you have a hard time wearing the foreman hat because you're the foreman now.
I think I have a hard time wearing any hat because it's what it is if I think too much about anything, it's the idea that nothing matters, and it really starts getting to me.
So like nothing matters in the sense that we're all just floating on a speck of dust. In the middle of
I'm
the
just here
universe.
for an arbitrary amount of indiscriminate time. I'm just waiting.
What a ride!
I'm just waiting
For what?
for it to end.
No, go and make it happen, man.
See, that's two different frameworks of
I'm
life.
the complete opposite. It gives me.
I understand.
Like the second which is weird because you seemingly make decisions based off of the enjoyment of the knowledge that permanence is not a real thing.
Yes.
Like you're more covered in tattoos than I am
Mm-hmm.
by a long shot, which to me is like a signal of like, oh, this guy gets it. It's like this guy's here for a good time, not a long time. It's like you're not here for a long time or a good time. What the fuck are you doing?
Yeah, I think that's the problem.
But I don't get it. Like every day of your life, you don't do anything that you don't want to do.
I know.
But like, what is the antidote to this? What is the solution to this problem?
It's a good question, and I think it's finding purpose.
Okay.
And like I'm so against that whole idea of like everyone has to have a purpose.
Okay.
Like we all have some like chosen purpose that we discover.
Yeah.
Like that's not what I'm saying.
No.
But I think it's like it's directing yourself towards like a purpose every day
I think it's
as a means of 24-hour distraction.
right. I think it's whittling down the things you don't like to do.
I think it's whittling down the time.
No. I think purpose is like it's something that's there, and you just whittle down all the stuff that distracts you and you don't like. And like is probably the wrong way to do it. I do a ton of shit I don't like to do, but it's like I'm left with I have no idea what my job is. I have a hard time explaining it to people.
Oh, same.
Right, but it's like it's just the thing that's left after I do none of the other shit I don't like to do. But you've done that,
I know.
and you're still not satisfied.
It's not that I'm not satisfied. Like I am. That's the hard part of this.
But you're the right person for the job because your job doesn't exist.
And then I don't exist.
But
And then none of this exists.
See, I don't know. I feel like that's you're using a logic trap to
I feel
keep,
I'm trapped
to
in
keep
logic.
proving your point. Well, and maybe that's part of it. I literally had when I was talking to my shrink last week, and he's like, you have panic attacks when you can't logic things.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that's really because you know what it is. It's you think everything's a zero-sum game,
Yes.
and it's not. And that's the most difficult thing for a logical person to deal with because you don't have any control over anything.
Well, I think that's the idea. Is I don't have any control over how long I'm going to be here.
Right.
And I understand that once I am not here, I effectively don't exist.
Right.
So then it makes this seems like I'm in a really big waiting room, but by the time they call my number, the doctor's gone home for the day, and they're like, "Oh, you're gonna have to come back tomorrow." That is like the perfect metaphor for how I feel.
You know what it is? I think you just watch way too many obscure movies.
I was gonna say that.
Actually?
I'm like, this guy watches way too many fucked up German, French,
Yeah.
Israeli,
Impressionist.
whatever.
Israeli, hey, don't bring them in. Got to keep this podcast on the air.
But
That's
I
my purpose.
Yeah, no, I don't. I think it's a framing problem. The framing of it as a job that has to be fulfilled by a certain role, it indicates to me that you look at the world through this as a zero-sum game. And it's not, because you have no control over anything.
So it's like my life needs its own director of photography to fix the vision that I have, to frame the vision that I have.
Yeah, but
better.
it doesn't need to be fixed because you're the guy on either side of the camera.
Oh, man.
You're the guy.
At least I'm not Alec Baldwin. Wish I was.
Wait, did that ever come out? Like,
It came out of the barrel of a gun.
He had an apology that was like.
I think he said that he didn't pull the trigger.
No, he
that
said
seems like a bull.
he
Oh, you saw it?
knows. He said he knows who loaded the gun. He's not going to say who it was, but he wasn't the one that killed the person, even though he shot the gun.
So someone handed him a loaded gun. He didn't think to check.
Bingo.
That's a weird-
That's the biggest thing.
That's thin. That's
Anytime
real
that
thin. That's anorexic.
Basically, I was reading a bunch of shit on the internet. All these like gun people are like, "This is the problem. This gives guns a bad name." You're supposed. Anytime somebody hands you a gun, you look at it. You say, "Okay, it's loaded. It's not loaded. If it is loaded and you don't want it to be loaded, you take the bullets out." All that shit.
Is that the way it works in the film industry, or is that like a gun safety law?
That's the way it works everywhere. Like, even if you're using a fake gun, you're supposed to do that.
But in the film industry?
Everywhere. The film industry is different. Well, it's the same rules and the same because he's guilty. Like, it's
Sure, yeah.
He shot the gun. He didn't look at it. So in the film industry, there's a guy who's
An armorist.
Armorist, yeah. He's the one who's supposed to be in charge of everything.
Yeah.
You're never supposed to have live rounds
Of course.
on the set, but even still, like, technically you're supposed to look at it. They never do. It's going to change, obviously, with how big this has gone and like how they do the shit. But yeah, you have to look at the gun every single time you use it, and he didn't do that. So I don't know if he's gonna get serious jail time. It's definitely like some type of manslaughter charge or whatever.
There's no way he does a day inside.
I don't think so.
There's no way.
But like we've seen this happen multiple times.
I think he might get like 6 months or something.
He's doing a house arrest.
Yeah.
He's
Yeah,
not
maybe.
fucking. There's no way.
Or some nice fucking blue collar,
Yeah.
cushy prison. I'd do that. 6 months in there. Shit.
Well, maybe that's what he needs.
Yeah.
Maybe he
Maybe
needs a
that-
6-month stint. Doesn't need a coma. He just needs a minimum security.
Yeah, I just need like 6 months to think about like, what do you suck at?
Well, do you think I don't think he needs 6 months.
No, maybe I just need 2 weeks.
I think it's a day over day thing
Yeah, I think so.
because it's like I suck at ballroom dancing,
Yeah.
but I also don't have to ballroom dance today.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter,
It's true.
right? Like I think if you can just set an intention of like the room you're walking into and the thing you have to do,
Yeah.
you're going to be infinitely better off than if you didn't. Because it's
Yeah.
like entering into a different room, you have a particular, like training kind of teaches it. Like you can have
Yeah.
a billion one things going on. It's like, well, I have a finite window to get this done.
Yeah.
And I need to be in this particular frame of mind, or I have to have this, whatever. I need to put my phone away. I need to do these 3 or 4 things. And I'd be infinitely better at training if I turn my phone off, put a playlist on that I don't have to fucking adjust, so I don't have to go to my phone, put a hood on so people don't fucking talk to me, and clear my schedule. If I do those 4 things, my workout's going to be infinitely better. So, I mean, you could fill a very large room with things that I suck at, but also I'm not walking into that room all the time.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like each one of those things I suck at exists in a certain setting to which if I'm entering that setting, there are probably a short list of things I could do to be orders of magnitude better at that thing in the short term. Like you always say, know like 5% about everything or whatever the fuck it is.
Yeah.
Right? So you can literally go into, like I was like blown away because you do your homework because you know the room. Classic example. We went to Leonard Fournette's house and he was popping off about some freestyle rap battle that happened the day before. And I was like, I don't know if it was on purpose or not that he knew Lenny's particular taste in music, but we started talking. It's the first time he'd met Leonard. And then within 5 minutes, they were best friends because they were going off with it. But the case in point, didn't know anything about, not saying he didn't, he probably does something that interests him or is something that interests him. But I wouldn't be surprised if we end up in a different room. We know preemptively we're going to be in this room. You look, because I've done it. I do. I remember when Milanachev came in the car. Pretty easy to figure out what a Russian powerlifter would listen to. But I went on his Facebook page. Hasn't been active in about 15 years. But 15 years ago, he liked Iron Maiden and Metallica. When I picked him up in the truck, I had Iron Maiden on. And he was stoked, and he cranked it up, and it was all good. Like, I don't think you have to be good at anything.
No.
I think the one skill to get better at is situational awareness.
Yes.
Right? Like, if you can go in, like, I'm going into this room now. I need to know, like, the number of, the amount of recon I do on people is hilarious. Like, if I'm going to meet someone, whether it's a player, whether it's another therapist, whether it's a coach, it's like, I'll know if this guy's a dog guy or a cat guy. I'll know what sitcoms, like, whatever your about section on your Facebook offers up to me, I'll weave that into a conversation seamlessly to make a connection.
You have to.
You'd think so, but I think like that's sort of it. It's like we can look at this daunting task of like, why am I here? It's like, I don't know, I'm going to walk through that door. Who's on the other side of it? Is there something that I can do to just be better at the skills I need? Because it's like, you know, I'm not going to be a Democrat in one room and a Republican in the other.
No.
Because I don't even know what that means.
Yes.
But it's like, I can, if I know like someone's more liberal versus more conservative, I'll sit a different way. I'll say different words. I'll swear less. I'll swear more. Right? So I think that's the biggest skill people can learn. It's just like, do your homework. There's no excuse. Like, just like there's no excuse to be dumb. Yeah. Because literally all the information about everything is
available.
Right. Like, I'll never forget the Clive Kaczynski thing or whatever the
Klaus
fuck
Kinski.
Klaus Kinski thing. Because I was like, you had been on that Wikipedia page before. And he looked like a fucking fox. Yeah. And I was like, okay, this just tells me that you watched the movie and you started asking one or two more questions. Yeah. One or two more questions that most people don't ask. Same thing with literally going to a job interview. Yeah. Who's the interviewer? All right, does he have a LinkedIn? Does he have a Facebook? Does he have a Pinterest? Does he have a fucking, does he have an Instagram? I'm just going to go through and just see what I can just create a connection through.
Do you think it's just because people like themselves aren't interesting?
So they don't project their interests outward as
they
something
don't think
that
there could. They don't think there could be an interest or value to things outside of like the nuts and bolts of the conversation.
Yeah, I think that's more than the majority of the population are probably that.
Because like we've had discussions this week with people who have said, "I've never read a book."
Yes.
Now I'm not saying you have to read.
Right.
I don't care if you do or not. But it's like the idea that like reading is a pretty low barrier of entry thing to do to expand your imagination even. Like read a picture book. I don't care. But people are like, I don't read. It's like, well, I always wonder like what they do with that time.
Yeah. I don't know.
Or people are like, I don't really like watch movies. And then they don't read. And they don't play recreational sports or do recreational drugs. I'm like, well, what inserts into that time? Like you stare at the wall?
I think so. I had this conversation. It stuck with me for 10 years. What was her name? Vanessa
Craig?
Did you go to Riverside?
Yeah.
She's a dental hygienist?
Dental assistant.
Got it.
Explaining a lot.
I literally remember having this conversation with her, and I apologize if this ever reaches her ear. But
do you think she's listening to RX Radio?
Well, someone might put it under her nose, and I don't want to be disparaging. But I literally remember having this conversation with her and just like trying to figure out, like she was asking me what I was doing. I think I was leaving for California at the time. And she's like, I'm like, well, what are you passionate about? She's like, I'm not passionate about anything. And then that's where we can spiral into like okay, maybe you're the wrong person for the job. Because that blows my mind. Like, I don't understand what that meant. And then she's like, I watch Friends. And I was like, okay, all right, that makes a lot of sense. But I think that's the majority of people, right? Because I don't think people are willing to whittle down to whatever it is they are left with when they do none of the things they don't want to do, right? I think that's probably where like the lack of interest comes from, or the lack of awareness around that other people might have interests that you could relate to and build a relationship from. They don't have that they don't have that receiver because they don't send out that transmission.
I see.
Right, but I totally agree. It's something where it divides very clearly people that you like when you meet someone, you know, like, oh, okay, like this person's going to be someone that I want to talk to again, or like, oh, not, never again. And I think the big, that big signal is like, do you like anything? Like, and it could be even weird shit. Because like, I'll sit here and listen to you talk about the weird movies that you talk about, and I'll watch literally zero of them.
Yeah, I hope
ever.
so.
There's no interest in it either.
Yeah, of course.
But my interest is in that you have an interest.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's like every day you walk in, I was like, what dumb shit. Like I would never wear that.
This thing's hilarious.
In a million years would I ever wear that. But I'm stoked that you wear it.
Yeah,
I'm
it's awesome.
stoked that it's around. Because it's like, well, it takes a certain, you have to be interested in streetwear to look at that and be like, yeah, that's dope.
This is it.
But it's like people are so like vanilla.
I think it's too many people. I think this comes down to like people having, an interest or a passion is, I think people are either, this is through nature or nurture, just grow up like waiting for permission. It's like they don't choose to go out and like anything because they're waiting for someone to say it's okay.
I think even through like a friend group or something.
Yeah.
Like if growing up liking music, there was a select few, playing music,
Yeah.
really. Writing songs, doing that. I loved it. But all of my other friends who didn't do that didn't understand it.
Yeah.
And when someone doesn't understand something, they usually, if they're a little shit, like most of the people we know,
Probably make fun of it.
exactly.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of people who say like, I don't really have an interest, have just been broken down so much by pieces of shit people who are just like, you can't like that. Why do you like that? You can't do that. And they just say like, I don't like anything. I don't know how to be cool.
Yeah.
And that's where like,
they might like something weird as hell. Like, oh, I like to watch Miss Universe. You know what I mean?
Shut up, Miss India.
Yeah, exactly.
Tuck it home. Steve Harvey.
It could
Go
be
to
any
goats.
type of thing. Like even even in that pageantry thing. Like if that's your thing, people are gonna talk shit to you because like you were a toddlers and tiaras, like whatever the fuck. You're 6 years old. You want to do that. You like that stuff.
Yeah.
People are gonna talk shit because that's what people do.
and I think like that's where people become uninteresting is out of fear.
And because there's a double edge to that sword, right? Like there's systems that you run, like sociological, interpersonal systems that you run that are based purely on survival.
Of course.
That there's a certain point where you've survived the need or you've outlived the need for those systems to run, but they're so latent in your subconscious that it's the only systems you know how to run that are based around survival. And like that's kind of useful. Like, and maybe it's not survival is like not from like a primitive standpoint, like you're going to die. But if you suffer what would be the right term? If you suffer a popularity death in grade school, you might as well just die.
Well, yeah, because
Right,
you're isolated from the tribe, right? It's the same as being exiled to the woods.
Right. So it's those systems that we run that are based out of fear serve us a purpose. I think that's the thing. Like, don't be, if you're a kid that shows up with like, blue hair and rain boots on, like, hey, fucking rock on, man. But I wouldn't aim for that. I would aim to survive through those points where you need to survive.
Yeah.
Like we're the codependency of human beings as animals next to the rest of the animal kingdom is insane. 18 years?
Yeah.
16, 18 years. Baby giraffe, you got 2 weeks to sort it out.
Yeah.
Or like the big thing's going to trample over you, right? So it's the hard part, I think, is unlearning it. It's like unlearning those systems and realize that like the consequences that those systems were protecting you from are no longer present. The fear that drove the necessity for those. Because like I think it's a useful endeavor. Like conformity is a very useful tool, right? As a child, like you fall in line, do your homework, make your bed, all that shit. I think all of that as a child is great.
Yeah.
But once you are no longer have to live in fear, once you kind of pass that codependency, start unlearning those. And and that's what you see in a lot of adults is like they don't realize that those systems are redundant and now like there's nothing to be survived. Like it's a different, I don't want to say ascension, but you don't have that same fear, or you shouldn't have that same fear.
Yeah, because like once you can like provide for yourself like food, water, shelter,
Sweet.
like really I am the judge, jury, and executioner of my own life. Like, fucking like that I wear Blundstones and watch Klaus Kinski movies. I'm still gonna go home and do it. You know what I mean? Like, you're not gonna like turn my TV off. So I think it's like, I think people even into adulthood live in this relative fear of like being into something that other people aren't into. That's why like everyone watches the same 4 TV shows.
Right.
Where it's like, oh, I love TV shows, and they list the same 4 as everybody else. It's like, but do you, or are you just doing that thing so you can have something to talk about with those people?
Yeah.
Because there's lots of TV shows that might be good, but like they're just uninteresting to me.
It's the immunity against the herd, or not immunity against the herd, camouflage against the herd.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? It's like everyone is like a zebra in the sense that it's like they're all these weird, and not to get too like fucking Hallmark card about it, but they blend in amongst zebras. It's like zebras don't blend into gold grass.
Yeah.
Like they're the easiest things to hunt in Africa ever of all time. Like you could fucking hunt these things from space.
Yeah.
It's just such a joke how contrasted they are to their environment. But if I'm, like let's use the childhood example. Like if I'm a bully, I got to pick off the zebra with the fucking green stripe because it's like, well, which one do I pick on or which one do I grab? It's like they're all standing in yellow grass with white and black stripes. It's like, oh, okay, the blue-haired kid. Yeah. That's easy. So it's like, well, whoop, we're going to fucking make sure that doesn't get dyed. So and it's just at a certain point, like bullying just doesn't work.
Yeah.
Right? Like, and that's what people are concerned about. Like, no one's going to like, if you're not going to sit on a city bus. I would. If I sat next to like jacket loser. But it's like, you could also just laugh and be like, that's hilarious.
Yeah, I know.
Because there's no consequence.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? It's not like I'm going to lock the door and not let you. No.
Yeah.
You and your glandstones can't
Don't
fucking
get on the bus.
Yeah, exactly. So I think one of the biggest or one of the most helpful tools for me was realizing that those systems were helpful. Right? I think a lot of people demonize themselves and those systems that they run subconsciously if they ever get to a point where they recognize why they're behaving the way that they are. And they immediately try to demonize them and be like, blame people like, oh, like you blame your parents. Like, oh, like you put me in hockey like everyone else. Like, yeah, thank fucking God.
Yeah, I wish my parents put me in hockey.
Right. It's like, so I was able to like, I had somewhat of a friend group and I was like in this thing already. And it's like, was I like 17 other kids and all the other kids I played against? Yeah, you're at an arena. Everyone's playing hockey. You're just like all of those kids. So it's like, I think the thing with me was it's useful as an adult to recognize the patterns that you were into or the systems that you ran and understand that those systems were benefiting you then. Because if you try and demonize them, and you try and demonize them now, it's like, well, you're not going to get anywhere. If you can just go like, accept like, hey, yeah, that was super useful. I just don't have to run them anymore. Rather than like, fuck, why did I have to do that? It's like, you're already off on the wrong foot. Like, this is not going to be how you get out of this trap.
And I think, to double back to like this idea of like me struggling for a purpose.
Which is ridiculous to me. I don't get it.
But I mean,
like vigilantism, like what do you?
But I think it's just the idea that like, again, like if I think too much about it, it's like, oh, what the fuck? Like there's no need to do any of this. But that being said, I think especially in our industry, there is this like massive amount of like, perpetual fear around saying something that people don't agree with or not having research to back up a thing you said, and it's like, I think, part of my purpose is to like talk about things that don't have research or talk about things that like aren't the same 9 posts you've seen. Because I think it's rare in our industry to have someone who makes a post that isn't the 9th iteration of something that was already talked about that day.
Yeah.
And I think we live in a community of people waiting for someone else to say something so that they can repost it.
Well, I think it's the constraint around fitness as a whole, for the most part, is often populated by those people who still run those systems because it's such an easily identifiable community.
And it's like everyone wears the Under Armour black t-shirt in their, that's the idea. It's like everybody conforms. Like we could go on Instagram right now and pull up 50 accounts where the profile picture looks the same.
Well, because
guy in black t-shirt, white background, coach. Same 12 things, coach something.
Looking for 12 men between the ages of 93 and
posting,
107 to get
posting
in the best shape of their life.
Tweet to Instagram.
Fucking can't.
And like
on Twitter. I don't want to see that bullshit on Instagram.
Waiting for a research study to back their exercise. Where I don't know anyone that we grew up reading where that was an idea in my mind was the research that backs this.
Yeah, I think fitness self-selects for people that still abide by more primitive operating systems.
Yeah.
Right. So that's the hard part to be creative in the fitness industry is like, to be creative in the film industry, self-selects for people who
Do something differently.
do something, who are able to kind of break down these conventional barriers and think from like a different vantage point, right? To like, you know, there's conventional and unconventional, and then there's like this idea of post-conventional. Shout out Mario Simon. You're not listening to this, but this is where I got this from. So this idea of like, you know, we have people in the fitness industry that seemingly lead very unconventional lives. That it's like, you know, like, oh man, like he's so woke and like he's in the sauna doing this and wow, that's so cool. I want to live like him. It's like, no, you don't.
Yeah.
No, you don't, because that's a conventional and unconventional are the same thing when the fucking tax man comes.
Yeah.
Right? Like this guy's still going to fall in line. Where it's like, if you can be creative in the fitness industry and think abstractly, like be actually free to just think without consequence, it's like, then there is no consequence. Right.
Yeah.
So that's when like you can say something. I always think of Paul Equin, right?
Yeah.
Paul Equin will make the RIP, make the claim about cluster training.
Yeah.
He's like, they were doing cluster training 65 years before the research on cluster training. So it actually takes creativity to drive the empirical evidence, but most people are just, you know, at the teat of empirical evidence. Like, you know, if you get to, and a lot of it can just be like going through all of it and you're like, well, is this it? Is this, I either fall in line with the rest of the zebras or I can just actually be creative. And I think that's where having like outside influences outside of fitness, you know, whether it's film or whether it's fucking food or whether it's, you know, I think a lot of the people who are really high up in fitness have more external influence in what would be the right way to frame it, in hobbies, in industries that are driven by creativity, where we're driven by conformity. Like the fitness industry is driven by conformity. 3 sets, 10 reps, quad extension, hamstring curl, whatever the hell, where it's like when someone comes in that's like, oh yeah, I like fitness and also fashion or movies or food or traveling or whatever, and they start to think creatively, it's like, well, you're entering in from a space that's populated and benefited by those who can think in like a more, I don't want to say, maybe like a more post-conventional way, and where creativity is not only allowed but encouraged. It's a prerequisite. Where now it's a conformity is a prerequisite to fitness for the most part.
Yeah. And I think like that's a big part of it. It's so funny to see this industry kind of like fall into this dizzying mess of just people conforming and waiting for research, because I don't remember when lifting weights started with academia. Like it started with a bunch of dudes trying to get jacked. Like, wasn't it like Buddy from the circus getting yoked? Who's the
Eugene Sandow.
Sandow. Like that guy's not a
I don't know
professor.
the origin story, but no.
Well, Eugene Sandow's like it was like a strongman circus performer, I think, type deal. Like he was just like a wonder of the world rip dude.
Yeah.
And then you have the guy who started York Barbell, who created gas heaters. Like he was a gas and oil heat company. It was York like gas, oil, and heat.
Okay.
And then he started a barbell club at his gas, oil, and heat company because he was only looking to hire yoked dudes to work there.
That's amazing.
And they started Team USA Barbell, the first weightlifting team.
Yeah.
The guy who started York Barbell owned a gas and heat company and then turned it into a barbell company, quit making gas, oil, lamp heaters, and transitioned to making weightlifting equipment at a time when no one was weightlifting. Yeah. So it's like we live in an industry born of people making it up, and we've somehow along the line turned it into an industry of having to have gone to school and have research to back ideas that guys who just guessed had in the beginning.
Yeah.
And it's weird. Like, I think there's a time and place for research, and I think a lot of it like makes sense in a clinical setting, makes sense in possibly like a sports science setting. But I think like in the industry that we're in, I don't think it needs to come first.
Well, I think there's a clear divide of people that I don't want to say ascend, because like by what measure are you ascending? But like people that drive the industry forward are usually bringing in concepts and creativity that they fostered in realms and disciplines that allow fostering of creativity.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like, you know, do you want to really push the industry forward? Do you want to make a name for yourself? Probably shouldn't go down the conventional route, because there's a bunch of other people waiting in line to do the exact same thing. And that line doesn't lead to the end result that you're looking for. Like, you know, if you find fitness through creativity and like through means of like, you know, expression and, you know, self-experimentation, you're probably going to do pretty good. Mm-hmm. But if you find it through textbooks, probably not going to do that. You're probably going to fall in line with the ball. And then most people are they're doubling down on this. Like, well, if I research more, if I study more, if I cite papers more, then that will accrue me the points. It's like, it's not only is that not how we keep score, the fact that you're attempting to keep score tells me that you're running a conventional model that is conforming to a system of thinking that's actually constraining you from being creative to begin with.
Yeah, like what is done is not the same statement as what is possible.
Right.
And I think we are unfortunately trending in the direction of what is done or what is proven and not what is possible.
Yeah.
And maybe that's why I'm here or you're here.
And that's why the real, it's kind of like the man in the arena thing. It's like, that's what really drives the industry forward, is the people doing it. And that's why we love athletes so much, because they're constantly pushing while we're sitting there, and maybe not me and you, but like an industry on the whole is sitting there with like our protractors and our compasses and our rulers and all this and a fucking T-square trying to sort out the physics of it. We like sit and look people actually doing it, and it's not it's equal parts what they're doing and the fact that they're doing something that I think leaves us in amazement of athletes, and not just their ability, but their ability to just step out onto the plains and actually do something rather than kind of sit back in the shadows of a lab. And that'll always be why the industry's the science is so far behind the art, because it's all, I don't want to say it's all subjective, but it is kind of all subjective. Like the objectification of fitness and health, I think, is really taken away from it. But it's funny because even as we objectify fitness and health and we come across data that doesn't make sense with what we know, we still try and double down. Like we talked about longevity, and it's like there's pockets of German settlers in North America that have ridiculously like homogenous populations where it's like this community is just German.
Yeah.
Like it's like you go into stores and like there's no anything, it's just German. And then you look at their diet and like, man, the amount of trans fats and that bratwurst is a lot. It's like, but you're missing the point.
Yeah.
That if your goal is longevity, it's like the bratwurst doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Right. So I think the continual, I don't want to say victimization, but for people to fall victim to really, useful systems of operating as a child, where at a point where you needed to like survive, is great. It's really useful to have somewhat of an ego as a kid.
Yeah.
It's kind of useless to have an ego as an adult. Right. That's why people like eat a bunch of shrooms and like talk about ego death. It's like, you can probably do that without gallivanting your ego on social media, talking about your ego death, which is always like the most funny juxtaposition to me. That's like, I really experience ego death. It's like, who?
As I tell you about it.
Right. Who
so it's still there.
It's still there. And it's probably, maybe it's at the bottom of that bag of mushrooms. Maybe that's where you'll find it.
It's probably stronger now, actually.
Yeah, you should. Yeah. Oh, it's fortified.
Well, I think explaining ego death to someone or saying you've experienced it is a more egotistical statement than whatever state you were in prior.
Yeah.
Because it's like, it's your relative awareness that you have control. So it's like the fact that you thought that you could eat something that came out of the ground and then 3 hours later experience some transcendental change of state sounds very egotistical to me.
Yeah. And then I think it's not a permanent thing. Like, I think something akin to an ego death would be something that we talked about earlier. It's like, I can walk into this room and this is who's on the other side of it. I probably suck at human interaction, but this is how I can be marginally better.
Yeah, and I think like when you said objectivity, and then you kind of went back to what you were saying about like conformity is a survival tool of people who are young. I think the thing we go back to is like time and space create context, nuance, and intention. And I think that creates what we think is objectivity, because an objective study done in 1942 at the time was research and was objective truth, right? We've studied this, protein synthesis is this, 1961. Well, I bet you that study isn't the objective truth 2022. Right. So what is objectivity, but in the time and space it exists in, right? So objectivity itself is subject to time and space. And I think that's something we ignore when we look at what we believe to be objective truths, is the idea of time and space.
Yeah, it's like people get the axis wrong. its subjectivity is always on the x-axis.
Yeah.
Right?
Like
it's
it will
the
always
independent
be
variable.
subject
Yeah.
to time and space,
Right.
making anything objective subjective.
Yeah, that's
And I'm not
interesting.
trying to do a weird logic circle, but it's kind of true.
Yeah.
Because if you look at the objectives of something, the objectives of a study, the objectives of a military mission,
Yeah.
well, they exist in the time and space it existed in.
Right.
Like you can't fast forward 100 years and do this same operation again, and the objectives remain the same.
Yeah.
Right? The entire people that could exist in that space are completely different.
And that's why if you look at means of measuring success now objectively, but your focus on attaining them is subjective, the subjectivity is the independent variable. Like, because if you go into a room and you can get someone, like I did this in like my interview to get into chiropractic college, within 2 minutes, I got Professor Snow, the guy, the vice president of the school, who's basically kind of gives you the nod. He was like, "Do you want to arm wrestle?" I'm like, I think we're good, right? Like I got in. We didn't talk about the school at all, but objectively, I achieved the transaction that I was looking for. But I got there through subjective means, because that's really going to be what dictates the context of the objective outcome, right? And that's where people miss. People are like, no, I got to make a change. I need to have the transaction to be objective, so I need to go by vehicle of objectivity. I finished cum laude in my undergrad, and I did an internship at this school, and then I did this, and I have this many volunteer hours, and it's like blah, 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 blah. And meanwhile, like if you don't see the subjectivity of the mid-50s dude that like, okay, he's been doing interviews for 4 hours, the top button's undone, the tie's a little, it's fucking hot, it's California, it's the middle of June. And it's like, if you don't recognize that, like that's your vehicle, dude, that's your in. Right. So I'm sitting on the other side of the room and everyone's like looking at their CV and I'm looking at them going like, do you not get it? Like, do you not get it? Because like, you're going to be looking at this trying to memorize that, or I'm just trying to read this guy.
Yeah.
Right. You're playing a zone. I'm playing a man to man. Right. And that's like your best offense is a good defense. Like that's how you fucking actually make a change, whether it's, training a client, whether it's meeting a business, whatever the hell, whether it's the guy bagging your fucking groceries. Yeah. Right? Like some people are sitting there looking, oh, no, don't put that in with the chicken. This guy's going to murder you. He's going to murder your entire family. But he'll fucking carry your bags to the car if you're like, man, just throw it all in there. It doesn't matter. Fuck the eggs. You know what I'm saying? You doing good? People don't get that. Yeah, like the axis thing. Like people are trying to make objective change, not realizing it's on the y-axis. Yeah. And the subjectivity is the constant. Yeah. That's the constant thing that matters.
So I think to just circle back to the beginning, because I don't know if this is useful to anybody who's listening to this.
I'm enjoying it.
Oh, so am I. But I think that's the thing. Like the objectivity of life is it starts at some point and it ends whenever it kind of chooses to. So it's like, don't worry about it.
Are you telling me or you?
Me.
Okay. Because that's the thing. Like I would say, and you're good at it, because I see I see your moves, because I know while everyone else is, looking in this hand at the objectivity, you're actually doing the sleight of hand over here that changes people's perception of their objective reality, and you're just manipulating subjective measures.
Yeah.
Like, when you meet the way you put your hands in your pockets when you meet some people, they're out of your pockets. And you're like, I know this because I do this. So it's like, really, I think from a purpose standpoint, it's like every person you meet, there's a purpose.
Yeah.
It's like, some people are running different programs. Like the guy bagging your girl, fuck, maybe he's the most altruistic fucking Zen guy, and he's ascended. He's like, you know what? I just want to bag groceries. Cool. Amazing. But if the guy's sitting there and the fucking cashier is like snapping at him and shit, and the guy before him was like, you didn't put the chicken in the other fucking bag, and now it's got to go in the recycle. It's like, fuck all your bags, you piece of shit. I would kick you in the dick. Then it's like, that's the purpose. Yeah. Right? Like, I think for me, and like, especially with you, that's why I don't ever buy it when you say this shit. Because like I see when you interact with people, it's like, no. That's it. Maybe it's just the only people you've interacted with are me and Lundy for the last week. But I think that's what it is. Like, that's what gives a lot of people purpose, is other people. Yeah. Right? So
I think because that's the point. Like, people are subjective. Yeah. So it's like, if you think about the objectiveness of life.
Oh, you're done.
That's what I mean. So it's like the minute you think like it starts whenever and ends whenever, and you don't have control over either of those points. And eventually, no matter what you do between point A and point B, like it's like riding a subway with no map. Yeah. You don't need the map. Eventually, they'll call the station and you get off. I've never gone on a subway and it not arrived at the station in which it intended to arrive at. Like it has to stop. Yeah. So it's like the problem with life is you're on a subway with no map and it creates anxiety. because you don't have this seemingness of control or like necessity in the journey.
See, I think again, it's when we look at a subway, we see something that moves like this.
Yes,
and that's
what
the
I'm saying.
objectification of the x-axis, where it's if you know those fucking rides at what's it called, Canada's Wonderland, the ones that just drop. I think if you physically
That's
take
life.
the analogy and go not a subway with no stops or with a bunch of stops, it's like this thing could drop down at any moment.
Yeah.
Now it's a y-axis, right? It's physically gone from here to x, from here to y. Now subjectivity exists along the x-axis. I think that frees up your mental clarity.
And that's what I think it is.
Yeah. So I think if you can just change the way you frame it and be like, all right, the thing could drop at any moment. So I'm just going to enjoy the view as it goes up.
Yeah.
And it goes down, enjoy the view on the way down.
That's it.
I think so. I think we're onto something.
I think we've arrived.
We've arrived.
At our
We're
stop.
here, whatever it is. And
We didn't know we were going, but it will stop
But
regardless.
that's the fun part. That's what the best part about being, because these aren't conversations you can have with everyone,
No.
right? And it's like, I think at a certain point, people get to a certain, and maybe they don't. I don't know. I don't think age is a sign of experience. Like I could probably have a conversation with like a 9-year-old kid in some fucking cancer ward that's way deeper than both of them.
Definitely.
Right? So I don't think age is a sign of experience, but youth isn't a sign of innovation, like that old thing. But no, I think it's cool to be able to sit back and just, because all we did was just think at each other for
But like
40
that,
minutes.
unless you made Lundy turn this on, I was about to have this conversation prior to us recording
Yeah.
some objectively better podcast.
That's subjective.